Good morning. This is John Hesse, Cahokia Presbyterian Church. We're reading from Of Moose and Men by Tori Martin and Doug Peterson. I'm reading the chapter entitled Driving Me Crazy. Forrest Gump famously said, "Life is like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get." The same could be said about buying a cheap, well-used Jeep from the post office. Shortly after arriving in Alaska, Rob and I realized we were going to need to buy a second vehicle. Our one was white, and I kept losing it in the snow. So I set about the business of car shopping. It was summer at the time, but I knew winter would be fast approaching, so I looked for something that could handle the snow in the mountains where we lived. I made an exhaustive search for a new car, which in man speak means I bought the first vehicle I saw. The post office in Anchorage was selling used Jeeps for $2,000 apiece. Not a bad deal, but the catch was you couldn't test drive them. You had to pick one out blindly and hope and pray it held together without duct tape. I wound up with a 1982 CGA8 Jeep, and though in the summer it drove great, although I did have to get used to driving on the wrong side. Post office Jeeps have the right steering wheel on the right side, the passenger seat in a normal car. When the first snow arrived with winter, I discovered the Jeep's many limitations. The heater didn't work, the defroster was faulty, and the Jeep had removable doors, so it wasn't airtight. Although why a post office would want removable doors on a Jeep in an Arctic climate is beyond me. What were they thinking? It's freezing in here, but I still have feeling in my toes. Let's get rid of the doors and fully commit. So this is the vehicle I was soon driving around Alaska in freezing temperatures on snow-packed roads. As Forrest said, you never know what you're going to get, and metaphorically, I had bitten into the most awful piece of chocolate in the box. The only one who seemed satisfied with the Jeep in spite of its many flaws was Sam. I suspect this was largely because he liked to sit completely upright in what appeared to be the driver's seat, and he reveled in the looks of envy from other dogs as he appeared to be driving by. The defroster was on the blink, so I kept an ice scraper in the front seat. As I drove, I kept one hand on the steering wheel while I scraped the inside of the windshield. I would even lean over and clean Sam's side of the windshield because he also needed a clear view of the road, just in case he had to take the wheel in a pinch. Sam probably would have been a better driver anyway. I also kept a second ice scraper on hand. This one had a long handle that allowed me to open the windows and reach out and scrape the outside of my windshield as I drove. While I was at it, I could use the scraper to whack the windshield wiper, which regularly froze in place. The scary part was that I was a dubious driver, even when I wasn't trying to scrape windows and drive at the same time. Ask Rob about my driving habits, and he'll probably mention that snowy day when I risked driving on the slick roads to the Walmart in Anchorage just so I could talk to a people greeter. I was that desperate for human contact. I was about 4 miles down the road when I hit a patch of ice and lost control of the Jeep. Suddenly I felt as if I were in the teacup ride at Disney World, spinning round and round and round and trying to turn into the spin, as they always say. When I slid off the road and into a snowbank, I had no choice but to call Rob at work. "What was so important to get at Walmart that you had to drive out in the snow?" he said. "Whatever you needed, I could have picked up on the way home." That might have been awkward. I needed a people greeter. What? I needed human contact with somebody who didn't snap at me every time we talked, or say whatever every other sentence. Whatever. The people greeter has to talk to me, I explained. It's his job. Besides, it's like free therapy. You should try it. A few more years with you, and I'm sure I will need counseling. So Rob left work and drove out to rescue me, hooking the tow strap to his truck and pulling me back onto the road. "Follow me into Anchorage, and I'll make sure you get there," Rob said with a scowl. So I drove as carefully as possible, keeping my eyes focused on the back of Rob's truck. The road was snow-covered and slick, but I was doing fine until I reached Rabbit Creek Overpass. I didn't realize at the time just how dangerous an overpass can be, because an overpass doesn't have ground beneath it, only air. It loses heat rapidly and freezes rapidly. I learned this the hard way when I reached the overpass. Suddenly my Jeep was sliding sideways down the road, and I'm like, whoa! I made it across the overpass, but on the other side, in the ditch, once again. Even worse, Rob hadn't been checking his rearview mirror regularly, and he was long gone. So I called him on my cell phone. "Are you still behind me?" he asked. "Well, technically, yes." "What do you mean, technically?" "Well, I'm behind you, but I'm in a ditch." Rob was becoming technically ticked, but he wheeled around, drove back, hooked up the tow strap, and hauled me out of the ditch for the second time. When we finally reached Walmart, safe and sound, he told me, "You better plan on spending all day with that greeter, because I'm not going to tow you again. I'll stop by Walmart after work and follow you home." "Fine," I said. 5 hours at Walmart. I can do that. But 5 hours in a single store wasn't as easy as I thought, especially since the greeter turned out to be rather unsociable. He was friendly for a couple of minutes, and then I think he began to suspect I was trying to take his job. "Hi, welcome to Walmart," I exclaimed to the shoppers as they strolled into the store. "Do you want a shopping cart?" I was just trying to be helpful. When I finally gave up trying to become buddies with the greeter, I began wandering throughout the store for 3 long hours. I actually managed to entertain myself for a couple of hours before becoming bored out of my mind. You can only spend so much time alphabetizing the soup section. So, deciding I could not wait another 2 hours for Rob to get off work, I told myself I could drive home without an official escort. Good grief, I was a grown man. I could do it. I barely made it out of the Walmart parking lot. I was turning right out of the lot when my Jeep hit a patch of ice, and once again I was on a Disney World ride. This time I slid up and onto a 6-inch high concrete median separating the 2 lanes of traffic. I wound up perched on the median with my left tires hanging over one edge and my right tires hanging over the other. None of my wheels were touching the ground, so I was stuck. Motorists honked, shaking their fists and gesturing wildly as if to say, "Hey, you're on the median, mister," as if I didn't know that. Did they think I chose this as my parking spot? I was so embarrassed that I ducked down really low when I called Rob on the cell phone so none of the passing motorists could see me. As I said, post office Jeeps have the driver's side and the passenger side reversed, so it looked as if Sam had driven up onto the median. Sam just stared back at the people. "What are you looking at? You tried driving without opposable thumbs. It was a cat. I swerved." With growing trepidation, I dialed the phone. "Rob?" "Yes?" "I've got a problem. Let me guess. You left Walmart and you're stuck in a ditch somewhere." "Well, you're half right. I did leave Walmart, but I'm not in a ditch. I'm on a median." "A what?" "A median. You know, those are the things that separate." "I know what they are." I explained the situation to Rob, glad that I had the distance of a phone connection separating us. Grumbling, he agreed to drive out once again, and I waited in the Jeep, feeling growing embarrassment. When Rob drove out to Walmart to tow me for the 3rd time in 1 day, he was fuming. At first, he didn't say a word. Moving swiftly, he got out of his truck, staring daggers at me as he hooked the tow strap to the back of his truck and then to the front of my Jeep. Finally, he stomped over to the Jeep and knocked on the window. Rolling down the window, I tried to lighten the mood. "Oh, look, Sam, there's Rob. What a surprise." Rob was not amused. "You're going to want to hold on to something," he said. So I held onto the dashboard as he towed my Jeep, and with a mighty bump, we were pulled off the median. Then Rob, still hitting me with a laser-like glare, got out of his truck, unhooked the tow strap, and knocked on my window again. This time, when I rolled down the window, I didn't try to lighten the mood. Without a word, Rob handed me the tow strap. "Here," he said, "keep the tow strap. The next time you get stuck, you can wave down anyone you want. You're not calling me." "That's not a very Christian attitude," I said. Probably not the wisest choice of words, but correcting my spiritual mentor always made me feel better. However, it just served to further annoy Rob. Apparently, I had pushed his missile launch button. As Rob returned to his truck, he ran his hand along the vehicle's cab, gathering just enough snow to form a nice round snowball. Spinning around, he hurled the snowball at my Jeep, and it went poof on the windshield just in front of my face. He followed me home just to make sure I made it safely, and then he took my keys away for safekeeping. On that day, I discovered that driving in Alaska was a good training ground for understanding the challenging words of Jesus. "Enter through the narrow gate. For wide is the gate and broad is the road that leads to destruction, and many enter through it. But small is the gate and narrow the road that leads to life, and only a few find it. Matthew 7, verses 13 and 14. In my experience, that road's not just narrow, it's also icy and snow-packed. In Alaska, the snow falls so heavily that plows often settle for clearing just a single lane in one direction and a single lane in the other direction, creating a narrow path through mountains of snow and requiring you to be constantly on your guard. Evidently, God's lane is just as narrow, and I often wondered, Lord, why can't you give us a 10-lane highway that leads to life? Why does the wide road lead to destruction? But the reality is that God knows life is treacherous, like a narrow, icy road. Dangers are all around, and the precarious nature of life requires us to be vigilant. Therefore, like any good parent warning a child to drive carefully, God wants us to understand that if we race down this slick road, we will inevitably wind up in a ditch. So stay on the straight and narrow and icy. And if you need someone to talk to, you don't have to shovel through 6 feet of snow and maneuver down icy roads just to spend time with a Walmart greeter, as nice as they are. God is right there, right now, ready to listen. And He never even gets tired of towing us out of ditches. And thank you very much for your time. Have a good week.